Loris Malaguzzi is a major educational influencer of the 20th century. He was well knowledgeable in early childhood education, secondary education, psychology, and various pedagogies. Loris Malaguzzi was born in Reggio, Italy on February 23, 1920. At the age of 3, his family moved to Reggio Emilia, northern Italy, where he lived most of the rest of his life. Malaguzzi attended school in Reggio Emilia as a young child. He was influenced by socialism and progressivism during his early years. Schools during this time were developed by socialist administration with a progressive influence for state and communities to provide care and education for young children to support working mothers. In 1922, the fascist dictator Benito Mussolini began ruling Italy and continued his reign until 1943. Mussolini diminished municipal school systems such as the one Malaguzzi attended in Reggio Emilia. This regime still felt it was necessary to provide for young children and mothers. Malaguzzi's life is now affected by totalitarianism. In 1938, Malaguzzi finishes magistral secondary school in Reggio Emilia, which allows him to become a teacher. His teaching career in elementary and middle schools continues until 1946. In 1940, Italy entered World War II when they sided with the Germans, which solidified German occupation in northern Italy. Malaguzzi married his wife in 1944. At this time, the city of Reggio Emilia was bombed. Reggio Emilia was liberated 1 year later in April of 1945. As a result of the growing up under fascist rule and horrible times of war, Malaguzzi's views on childhood, career, public schools, and pedagogy were greatly influenced. He was influenced by liberation, resistance, freedom, and women's movements. Post-war, there was a need for cultural and political renewal which reflected solidarity, peace, social justice, and women's emancipation and democracy, of all which influenced Loris Malaguzzi and his educational philosophy. Loris Malaguzzi was also influenced by liberating pedagogy, Marxism, and social reconstructionism. In 1945, Loris Malaguzzi joins the Italian Communist Party. He saw a need to help and liberate children, women, orphans, and veterans of war. Pre-war and post-war society needed to change. Community, culture, dialogue with others, imagination, problem-solving, playtime, education, and learning environments needed to be improved and renewed. He wanted every child to have free access to education, and not just any prescribed education, but rather education that took care of the whole child, socially, economically, politically, and physically. The war brought about a desire for renewal in public education, schooling, and its environment to improve Italy's culture. The PCI, Italian Communist Party, allied with small businesses, artisans, farm workers, and were inclusive of everyone. The Communist Party was appealing especially in context to a fascist and dogmatic leadership that the country had just endured. Malaguzzi was also influenced by pragmatism in that he thought it essential for children to not grow and develop according to the prescribed curriculum and knowledge. Rather, children need to take the reins of their own education, growth, and future. He deemed that the child is a bearer and constructor of his own intelligence. Teachers should not take over the learning process. They should step aside, watch the learning process, and then guide the students when needed. Children should oversee their own progress to create a lifelong love of learning. Since each child can be at different developmental stages of maturity, each child will inherently know when they are ready for the next phase of research, learning, and development. This thought of learning from others, borrowing and using their knowledge of pedagogy to improve oneself and their society, comes from pragmatism. As a result of war, Italian citizens wanted to better themselves, renew their society and culture so that war would not come again. One of Loris Malaguzzi's major influences was Jean Piaget. Malaguzzi spent time in Europe learning from Piaget and observing his schools of thought. Despite Italy's aversion toward foreign influences, Malaguzzi was able to integrate Jean Piaget's philosophy into the curriculum of the Reggio Emilia approach. Piaget defined children's developmental stages, and Malaguzzi agreed with Piaget's claim that without experience, thinking is not nourished. Malaguzzi developed summer camps for struggling students. He felt something from the child's prior life experience or lack of experiences could be blocking their growth. Therefore, psychodiagnosis and therapy were needed to provide for children. Schools placed in the mountains or by the seaside had positive therapeutic effects for young children and students with emotional, behavioral, social, and cognitive immaturity. In 1946, Loris Malaguzzi graduated from Urbino University with a pedagogy degree, had a son named Antonio, quit teaching for state schools, and became one of the founders and first teachers at Convito Scuola Rinascita, or boarding school revival, in Reggio Emilia. Boarding schools helped older teenagers and young adults from war learn a trade. In 1947, he became the editor of the Progress of Italy newspaper. In 1950, the city of Reggio Emilia receives a gold medal for its efforts in liberation. In 1951, Loris Malaguzzi steps down as editor and attends National Council of Riches for a course in clinical and educational psychology. He also becomes a founder of the Municipal Psychopedagogical Medical Center Reggio Emilia and works as a psychologist for 20 years. Malaguzzi had a love for reading, theater, poetry, journalism, art, politics, and education. Post-war, there was a need for citizens to meet and exchange in conversation. He felt the theater was a place where people could gather, debate, exchange, and dialogue about education, politics, and other subjects. In 1953 to 1956, he works with the Children's Theater Group. In 1958, he becomes the founder of the Theater Club. The Reggio Emilia children are always encouraged to start projects of interest, problem-solving, and dramatize their projects through art, music, poetry, theater, and what is later referred to by Malaguzzi as the 100 languages of children. The philosophy that encompasses 100 languages of children was that children had endless potentials and languages of creative expression, which all leads to success. Loris Malaguzzi's educational philosophy became known as the Reggio Emilia approach. In the 1960s, the desire for more municipal or public schools for children was rising. Reggio Emilia has 33 schools for 3 to 6-year-olds, or rather had 33 schools for 3 to 6-year-olds at that time. Malaguzzi becomes the consultant for new municipal schools, and the first municipal school, Robinson Crusoe, opens in 1963. The second one, called Anna Frank, opens in 1964. Due to the lack of adequately educated teachers, Malaguzzi proposes annual professional development for teachers and administrators to keep up with new technologies, update each other, and learn new pedagogies for relevant instruction. To support teachers and children, it was important to provide an atelierista. This was a studio teacher guide with a creative arts educational background who works with classroom teachers to facilitate learning experiences that complement the pedagogy curriculum for the teachers and the students. The atelier and the teacher also document each student's discoveries and learning through their art projects. In 1968, Malaguzzi becomes the consultant to municipal schools in Modena, and the third municipal school, Primavera, opens, and in 1969, another school called Gulliver opens. Some of Malaguzzi's pedagogical guidelines are written and include more art, coloring, drawing, and painting. He establishes that parent participation is always key to the success of the child's development and education. Parents need to come to school meetings and be a part of the educational and pedagogical process whenever possible. Another role of the parent is to learn from the teachers and their children. It is important for the parents to keep inspiring their children to be creative researchers. They are to keep an ongoing back and forth dialogue with their children daily while supporting what they are learning. The teachers and their teaching methods should adapt to the child and their developmental level. Loris Malaguzzi's educational philosophy was based on the constructivist movement, progressivism, pragmatism, Marxism, communism, liberationism, social reconstructionism, and most of all, psychology-based educational pedagogy. It is different from perennialism and essentialism in that learning and thinking are not universal. Malaguzzi believes children learn through real-life experiences, through a child-centered approach, thought-provoking questions, experiments, projects, and interventions. He argued children learned by being researchers and experimenters in an inspiring and inviting school environment. Learning through play by experimenting and problem-solving, and not through prescribed talk but rather back-and-forth dialogue, was important. Students learn from their teachers, other children, and their environment. The classroom's purpose is to inspire creativity, discovery, curiosity, and be rich in materials. It needs to have an open kitchen and big windows to observe the lives of others in their community. The children need to have respect for themselves and others, know how to live, take care of themselves, try new things, investigate, play, imagine, explore, research, and display or act out their learning. They also need to know how to speak, listen, argue, discuss, and learn to accept other opinions while respecting others' religious beliefs. The classroom should show posted projects and achievements on the walls, and even allow students to finish projects from a while ago. Failure is an important part of the process to progress. In the 1970s, Malaguzzi is the director of the Reggio Emilia Municipal Schools for infants and preschool-age children. He promotes collaboration between schools and theater, which included puppets, marionettes, and the first puppeteer. The first school for infants ages 0 to 3 opens, and the first secular early childhood conference is held. Malaguzzi continues journalism and continues to debate and inform rights for children, including the inclusion of those with special needs. In the 1980s, Malaguzzi is the president of Gruppo Nazionale Nidi and holds an exhibition called If the Eye Leaps Over the Wall in Italy. He then retires as director of municipal schools, but continues to collaborate with Reggio Emilia's schools, educate and create new centers. During this time, he argued, children and adults always transit simultaneously through cultures and social sphere, and the relations between them, their being and their becoming, are part of interwoven processes, even when they seem distant or even contradictory. In the 1990s, Malaguzzi is part of the Who Am I Then International Conference. The Newsweek magazine nominates the Diana School, which represents the Reggio Emilia school system, as one of the most advanced early childhood education schools in the world. He receives the Cole International Teaching Award. Loris Malaguzzi dies in 1994. After his death, the Reggio Children is founded. Loris Malaguzzi is arguably one of the most influential people in the world for creating journals, avenues, and international forums for open discussions and debates where theories of education could be debated, discussed, practiced, and observed. Malaguzzi's educational philosophy focused on the whole child as a learner, and the curriculum changes and adapts to the child every day. The American educational system has a heavy influence of state standards with prescribed, scripted curriculum that must be met and assessed at certain dates and times. These standards are not necessarily flexible to the child's psychological development. Loris Malaguzzi and the Reggio Emilia approach is focused on the whole child, the various ways of learning, experiencing, and expression. His influence is unprecedented from post-World War II to our modern times. The Reggio Emilia approach is currently being studied and practiced by educators around the globe.